What exactly did you feel when you spent a couple of days rather there, and in your interaction with the women, with the children, with the youth, and even the traditional rulers, what are the vibes you were getting? Is it a kind of acceptance of what is coming from the government and some kind of trust being built?
Well, I tell you what we get, first of all, everybody believes in President Buhari. The integrity of our president is what people believe. There is hope and something can happen. Then they're
the Ogoni's feel same?
Oh yes, I believe that. I believe that, but everyone that we've spoken to have said, well, this is actually coming true. There's a lot of skepticism. So they check me out as a minister and the Minister of State to say, well, you know, are they really coming down here? I've been down there more than once, twice, doing things that perhaps other ministers haven't done. But that's because we have a leader who says, I'm going to deliver, and you do what you need to do to understand the people and do it. But I think what's more important is I'm talking about sustainability the day after the launch. The launch is an incredibly important moment. It's historic, it turns a leaf on the struggle, but what's more important is what comes after. So in my conversations with the community is more than just saying, you know, I've come to see you, what's your problem? It's actually, let's sit down and talk about this problem. What do you think are the alternatives? And even if I spend 2-3 hours there, I take back with more conviction what we need to do in Abuja to make this work. So I think, you know, we are really working through the different, as I said, committees that we have and the people who are on those committees, and every now and again you do a quick check in the community to see if what they're saying is right to make that work. So I think it's good.
Sorry, Chamberlain, I still want to get something clear here. For instance, if I'm a youth who live in Ogoni and the government says this is what I bring it to the table, we're trying to clean up and we're fixing things, and you tell me don't drink that water because it is toxic. Have you been able to provide an alternative for them?
I would never say to someone, don't drink the water if there's no alternative, because you know that water is life.
Good.
So no matter what happens, I will drink that water if you don't give me an alternative. So some of the emergency response measures that we want to put in place after the launch will be looking at that clean water so that you get it. And it's a transition. It's what do we do day one, and how can we set targets to make sure that everyone has clean drinking water by a certain time. The feasibility of it, the baseline, which communities. The past administration put up a lot of signboards to say don't go here and don't go there because they're contaminated. But I can tell you everybody's there because there's no alternative. And so I think that's what's incumbent upon us, is that don't stop someone before you have that alternative, and really know that the alternatives are possible. We have to treat this with urgency, but we have to plan well. Because you can put the alternative water today and it won't be there tomorrow, then you've lost trust. So I think, you know, sustainability.
In much as everybody wants to get or see this done, but some of the challenges, you talked about what you met. There's this HYPREP. I don't know if you heard about it, this Hydrocarbon Pollution Restoration Project. They are the specialized agency that were created the last government to tackle this. We understand they've got, I think, billions in deficit of salaries that are supposed to be paid. And they're saying, look, if this is not paid, it just may hinder this cleanup. What can you tell us about that?
I mean, this administration has inherited things that are beyond one's imagination. The level of irresponsibility is one that I think we haven't had in our history. We did inherit HYPREP. It is a good vehicle as it is designed. There's a gazette behind it. We've revised that to make it more responsive for what we need now. And yes, we did inherit a considerable amount of debt. However, that debt is disputed because the number of people that have been employed, those that have been done so legally and those that didn't. But by default, all of them were paid. And so there is a responsibility for us to, committed to. So there is a responsibility for government to look at the legal implications of this and to make sure justice is done. So what I would say to those people is that we are not ignoring what has happened, but we have to review it, and we have to be fair to the Nigerian people whose resources these are. But also to them that commitments were made in the faith that they were. So it is a challenge, but I believe that we will overcome that, and certainly they are part of the solutions that we need to move forward.
What happens to this part? Because we also understand that in January 2014, the then GMD of NNPC, Mr. Andrew Yakubu, had approved some 2.5 billion that was supposed to be paid, but they said they didn't see it.
Well, we're still reviewing all the things that have been said to have been paid and not paid, and I think these are some of the challenges that we have when you try to look for the paperwork and you know, the reality behind it, then sometimes that's just not quite there. That's a work in progress. It is billions that we have got in debt, and we have to resolve that. We have to come to the bottom of it. It has to be, you know, one that's done within the rule of law, and everyone knows that that's what this administration stands for. Governance is a big issue, and we've got to look at, you know, the root cause of all of this.
So does HYPREP understand that, look, you have to hold on while we sort this out, then we continue, or we still have to continue with the processes pending the time this is determined?
It's a parallel process, and I think they're aware of that. We've spoken to many of them. I have to say that there are many who worked in HYPREP who have got really good expertise and done well. And so, you know, one would hope that we would continue with some of them. But by and large, this was not so. And I think that, you know, we have to be fair, that when we're going to start, we need to start with clarity and transparency. Because, you know, HYPREP, when I go to the community, people will say to you they did nothing. People will say to you that they don't have any confidence in that. So, you know, if I'm going to work in these communities and make sure that this is sustainable, then we have to look at all aspects of it. HYPREP is the vehicle we continue with. It is through HYPREP that we will execute the Ogoni cleanup with the UNEP report, but we've got to clean house.
You came into this office to meet a myriad of things. You talked about issues of cases of irresponsibility in some parts, but the challenges are enormous. You have the situation in Ogoni land, and that's not the only land that's polluted. You have other lands that are polluted. You also have issues with the erosion and all of that. You also have to battle that. The questions that I would want to ask is, what kind of budget would you be running with?
Well, you know, clearly there are insufficient resources to do the things we need to do in Nigeria today. You can see the competing demands in the budget. So we've got to try to be innovative about where we get resources outside of the budget. There's a lot of resources that the Paris Agreement opened up for countries like ours to access, and we're working on the Green Climate Fund to see how we can do that for many of our programs. We also have opportunities of the capital markets now, and to see how we can go about structuring green bonds that can also bring in the private sector to do this. So we've got to look at a good finance mix that allows us to do this, but we have to draw in much more capital from the private sector. I think we can do that. If I look at the Great Green Wall, I don't see us just planting trees. I think it's an economic corridor that you put in trees that are economic. So from them comes profit, and that way you will see communities engage with it, to bring small and medium-scale industries, to look at the energy mix so that renewable energies can come in. And so you have a thriving corridor of 1,500 kilometers. It's 11 states, 49 local governments, over 40 million people, especially women. The diversification of the economy and agriculture, you bring the trees into it. And so you're reclaiming your desert, but you're also creating that empowerment of people that I said and taking climate action.
In moving forward here, you are the top federal. How are the states playing along with you? Because issues of recycling of the environment, we're talking about solar energy, for instance. The panels, how do they manage that waste that comes from there? You have trash. How's that managed? Are the states buying into this vision of cleaning and maintaining Nigeria's environment so that the deterioration doesn't get that far?
I think the first thing we have to do is to have that conversation and agree a partnership with the three tiers of government, how to address trash, how to address open defecation, how to address things that happen in all our lives, but essentially at the grassroots. So the National Council for Environment this year is going to pick up a number of issues where states must be an integral part. And one of those things will be the firewood. Because we can't continue to the afforestation at the level it is between logging and firewood. We'll have an emergency meeting on that on Friday. But we'll also be looking at other issues of, if we put targets like we would like to take any plastic bag, pure water, the bottles off the street by 2019, can't be done without the states. So what edicts can you put in place? How can you bring in the private sector who produce the plastic to be part of that? And you can, with the extended producer's responsibility, make that so. How do we go about open defecation? That's public toilets. That's one thing we all have in common. We all go to the toilet. So how do we do that in dignity? How do we say a target for public places? Knowing fully well that many homes don't have the toilets. So putting them in public places with the private sector requires the states to be a part of it. They have to provide water, they have to provide land. So it's, getting memorandums of understanding with them, bringing the incentives for them to do this. So looking for some sort of conditional grant mechanism and partnership with the private sectors to do it.
Your ministry has a whole lot that can get into other ministries, the Ministry of Water Resources, if you understand what we're saying, and even the Health Ministry. Looking at Ogoni and so many other places where we have some, environmental hazards and degradation, when you go up for cleanup, when you go out for cleanup, definitely you also be thinking of how to get those people pretty okay in terms of health. Have you been working or having a discussion with the Health Ministry, especially that of Ogoni exercise? Because for the people, when the trust is already built, they have the clean water for the interim, and a couple of other issues that must be put in place. They still would love to see that some of their children and women, and even everyone there who is really down with any kind of ailment, is taken care of. What's the government doing?
Well, what we're doing is taking stock of work that's already been done with the Ministry of Health, so we don't duplicate that, and we can. There is already work that state governments have done.
Already going on there.
Already going on. Bielsa State Government, for instance, has done a number of studies of the effects of pollution on their people. It's tragic for those that have been there living with this for years, but also for newborn. So there is a huge health issue here. And that will be part of the emergency response, is to actually get our head around that. What's, I think, fortunate about this administration is we have great collaboration with the ministers. We know that this is not about silos. This is about a cross-sectoral approach. And so, therefore, the amazing ministers that we have in agric, in power, in water resources, solid minerals, transport, are all working together to see what part of this do we own. So it's not about us taking resources and saying, this is my mandate. It's about necessarily saying, my mandate says I need to succeed in doing something about agriculture or solid minerals and lead poisoning with the mining, and I've got resources for this. Can I use it to achieve that? Or you've got resources, can you make it meet these targets? So yes, we are working cross-sectorally. I think we could never succeed otherwise. Water resources is key to the sanitation issue. Health is key to the sanitation issue. We talked about we talked about Lassa fever earlier this year. How do we prevent that next year? That's our job, to look at the environment so the health don't have a headache trying to save lives at the beginning of next year on something we know that's pretty seasonal. So this is the same thing with the lead poisoning. How do we make sure that doesn't happen? What are the preventive measures? We dealt with the tragedy in Zamfara, but we now have one in Niger State. And this year we're going to be trying to learn lessons from that to make sure it doesn't happen somewhere else.